Welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self Respect. My name's Jared Mello, and I'm the Shepherd of Black Sheep. Before I begin today, please remember to subscribe to the channel if you're here and you watch the videos. A lot of people watch that probably aren't subscribed, but to subscribe would definitely help. And if you like the video, please remember to like the video as well. Now, this video is not going to be let's blame all women video, or for a man, it's not going to be woe's me, the women just like jerks or assholes. No, that's not what this video is going to be about at all. It is going to be about how a man can become a better version of himself. And if a woman finds that she's been with a lot of narcissists or jerks in her life, she's going to see probably some of the reasons that happens. And yes, trauma bond can absolutely be a part of it, but I think it's a mistake to believe that's the only part of it, and that this video here is going to go over that. Mac, what's shaking? We're going to go over another Teal Swan video here. Why women like assholes. And it's actually a really good video, though. It's a good video, and I think it's going to help men, and I think it's going to help women too. And I don't think there's anything in this video I disagree with, for that matter. It's pretty well done. And it's the parts of things that people don't say to men. That's why I think it's important, because this is the part that gets neglected. And they also go over parenting, if people have had a narcissistic parent. They also go over some of the mistakes that people do when they raise sons. All very good stuff to me. So let's jump right in here. Actually, we'll give it a minute. We'll give it a minute, Mac, for a few more people to come in here. I started a little late tonight. We had a family day. But how are things in your world? All right, let's begin here.
This is one of the most requested topics, and today you're in luck because I feel oh so inspired to dispel with the confusion. As you already know, there's this general feeling amongst both men and women that nice guys are kind of shit out of luck. Why? Because they have to get mean in order to get a woman. There's this idea that women like assholes. For those of you who don't know English so well, an asshole is a guy who is unresponsive to the feelings and needs of others. He's intentionally cruel, obnoxious, and heartless. It is the masculine equivalent to a bitch. Okay, so straight out of the gate.
So my definition of an asshole is a little bit different, but I say someone that is rude or obnoxious, extremely selfish, or inconsiderate consistently. And an asshole behavior is something that is one or more of those attributes. As the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect, I did create the 5 cluster W disorders for those who don't remember them. But one of them was a diagnosed asshole. Another one was nuance deficiency disorder. Another one was pathological truth avoidance. Another one was pathological fidelity avoidance. And the other one, accountability sensitivity dysphoria. I say some of these tongue in cheek, but they're absolutely a thing. And I invented them for a reason, because a lot of people struggle with those things. But that's my definition of an asshole. But let's see what she says.
Guess what? Women don't actually like assholes. In fact, they prefer men that are nice. But I'm going to explain to you why it seems like women like guys that are assholes. Feminists beware. I have to kind of warn you in advance. A lot of the information that I'm going to throw at you in this video, you're not going to like, and therefore are probably going to try to resist. 1. A woman isn't unattracted to a guy because he's nice.
And before she goes on here too, if everything she says doesn't apply to you, or if anything she says doesn't apply, what you do, and this goes for anything, you take what you like, you take what applies to you, and you leave the rest. That's part of what having nuance is all about.
She's unattracted to the guy because he lacks other qualities which a woman not only is attracted to, but needs in order to feel good in a relationship.
And that's a huge part right there. A lot of guys are lacking the qualities that women really need in a relationship in order to feel loved and safe. And these are the guys that are more passive. These are the guys that are submissive. They lack confidence. They lack assertiveness. They don't initiate. They don't lead. And those guys, they need to work on those things.
We could call these traits masculine traits. And the men within society who are traditionally labeled as nice guys, or worse, who identify with being a nice guy, genuinely tend to lack these traits.
Correct. Generally, the guys that are struggling, in dating, that's their problem. They lack those masculine traits.
Therefore, because of attraction to these traits which those men lack, and also the need for them in order to feel good in a relationship, most women actually feel forced to being with a guy who has those traits, even if it comes with that nasty side dish of some undesirable character traits. Nice guys tend to be passive, submissive, inactive, and retreating. They tend to follow instead of lead. They can be codependent and insecure. They're usually always agreeable to the degree that they lack boundaries and a sense.
And listen to that. Agreeable to the extent that they lack boundaries. That is humongous. And practicing radical self respect, that is the antidote to that, to not being so agreeable to the extent that you lack boundaries. And if guys are being honest with themselves, I can pretty much guarantee them that if they're really struggling in the dating world, uh, they probably struggle with some of these things, almost without a doubt. And there could also be physical attributes sometimes as well. But honestly, they say women love with their ears for a reason. So some of this is actually almost certainly a problem for guys.
Of what's actually good or safe. They tend to feel energetically small and therefore unable to protect and contain a woman. To the opposite, men who are masculine tend to take the leadership role. They're protective, they have direction in life, they're creative, they are strong, they tend to provide, they have good social skills, they have drive, they're encouraging, possess charisma and confidence. They tend to have high energy levels. They take positive ownership of the woman in their life. They take action. They provide containment for the feminine. In other words, it has nothing to do with whether or not a guy is nice. In fact, when men say, well, no woman really wants me because I'm a nice guy, that's actually just a cop out. It's a way of avoiding looking at the real issue, which is the fact that men who say that lack these qualities which women need in a relationship in order to feel good.
And almost every woman I know, they're going to like those masculine qualities that she said. The masculine guys, the guys who can sometimes even be a jerk, will have those qualities. And that is something that I think all men should cultivate. Not the jerk qualities, but those positive masculine qualities. And speaking of positive masculine qualities, if you're familiar with Man Talks on Instagram, and he's also Man Talks on YouTube, his name is Connor Beaton. I'm in the process of setting something up with him for 2026. And he's going to talk about positive masculinity. And I think he has a great message. So just a pre-announcement of an announcement there.
And guess what? You really need to separate niceness from this whole conversation we're having, because a guy could have all of those traits and be a super nice guy, and pretty much every woman would prefer that guy. So the real question is why?
And correct. And she's basically saying it's not because that a guy is a jerk or an asshole that a woman would like him. It's really more about the lack of those positive masculine qualities that the other guys have. That's what it's about.
Why would a woman choose an asshole with those traits over a nice guy without those traits?
And here it is, the $1,000,000 answer.
Two, the first thing we're going to do is look at biology. Now, I need you to keep in mind, especially because so many of my viewers are spiritual in nature, I need you to keep in mind that we are in a physical body. That means that biology absolutely does apply to you. And we are not here to transcend the physical or transcend the temporal. We are here to integrate it. So, what I'm about to tell you is an element of female biology that does not need to be fixed. We may prefer to have evolution have changed this already, but it's not the reality. For a woman, physically, attraction is about matching up with a person who will protect you, produce healthy offspring, and provide for you and those offspring. The man is your ticket to survival. No matter how much the modern world has changed, and no matter how much feminists absolutely hate looking at that truth, it's still the truth for women today on a physical, biological level.
On a physical, biological level, not only that level, not the other levels.
A vulnerable male leaves a woman in the position to feel like she has to do it all herself and fend for herself. This means that a male who lacks masculinity or those masculine traits which a woman needs in a relationship in order to feel good, she ultimately feels alone, or at best, with a nice sidekick or servant. But with a sidekick or servant at best, she's not with somebody who can actually contain and protect her. And so, in fact, all the pressure of the world is on her. And that's not a natural state of being for a physical female.
That sound familiar to anyone? Anyone know the relationship where the woman's with basically more of a sidekick, but it's really the woman that's in charge of that relationship? She's wearing the pants. I know I can think of several off the top of my head, but can you?
Also, for women, fear is woven into her biological experience. It is encoded in her entire nervous system. Essentially, fear is the baseline experience for women on Earth, whether they are aware of it or not. And guess what? When a woman has people they care about, like a partner and like children, this fear only multiplies. If you want to understand more about this, watch my video titled What Every Man Needs to Know About Women. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how nice a guy is if he can't provide a woman with the feeling that she's contained. She will feel exposed to the world and therefore like there's nothing between herself and all the various threats in the world.
And for those who don't know, I went over the containment part of her video in a different live stream that I did. But Teal has a whole video about positive masculine ownership, positive masculine containment. Check that out as well because she goes into more detail in that video. And I break it down on the channel here.
On top of this, most of these masculine traits are associated so strongly with testosterone, things like confidence. And the reality is, higher testosterone levels, the more attracted you're going to be to a man, especially when a woman's ovulating.
Also true, guys who have more testosterone almost always going to be more attractive to women. Just is the way it is. Guys with less testosterone, they're going to be the ones that partner with someone that is a woman that's more dominating and is in charge of the relationship a lot of times.
3. At all the different levels of reality, feminine energy and masculine energy are very different. Now, they tend to fuel each other in a positive way. What I mean by this is that when somebody is truly in masculine energy, it tends to call feminine energy into its power, and vice versa. It feels good for a woman to be in the natural expression of her feminine energy. But men are the initiators, right? Masculine energy is the initiative energy. And when a masculine energy flips, when a man is not in his masculinity, the polarity flips. Now, polarity flips within a relationship are one of the main causes of relationship issues in the modern world today. A flip in polarity in a relationship makes it so that a woman can't actually be in her feminine expression when she wants to be.
Now, what flipping polarity would mean to me, that's a relationship where the woman is acting more as the man and the man is acting more as the woman. And it's more like the woman is providing containment for the man. That is a relationship where the polarity is swapped. And there's a couple reasons why those relationships happen. Sometimes the women that have been burned by the more masculine men, they might feel safer kind of in those kinds of relationships because they don't really feel any threat from that guy. That guy's not going to like take charge and dominate in any way. So it makes the woman feel safe in that way, but it's not the same as her truly feeling safe and protected by another guy. That's a very different thing, in my opinion.
I need to explain something quickly. When men are being trained by their parents or by modern society to be nice guys, I don't want you to really fall for that because it's a smokescreen. When parents or society says we're teaching our son to be a nice guy, usually what that means really is we're teaching him to not be a man. We're stripping him of his masculine traits. Another way of saying this is we're stripping him of his natural power.
And that probably happens too, unfortunately. I mean, especially if you see maybe a single mother dynamic where she's been burned by dudes that have been jerks. She might want to make sure I don't want my son to turn out like that jerk. So she might do some of this. Now, is she the only one to do this? No, I bet you there's even times where both parents are there and it can still happen as well. These are the people that don't really have a healthy relationship with masculinity. And if they don't have a healthy relationship with masculinity, how are they going to teach it to their son? The answer is they're not going to be able to teach it or demonstrate it for that matter. And demonstrating it is the most effective way of teaching it.
Man begins to act passive, submissive, inactive, and retreating when he makes it a habit to follow instead of to lead, becomes codependent or insecure, or agreeable to the degree that he lacks boundaries and a sense of what's actually good or safe. When he's unable to take positive ownership of a woman, he cannot provide containment. He does not create security. He tends also to not be very responsible. Therefore, a woman compensates by becoming masculine. This means the tissues of her body begin to become hard, contracted, and metallic. Her body becomes armored. This is very opposite to this soft, receptive energy, which is natural to femininity.
Hmm.
This woman becomes stressed because all of the pressure goes onto her. This is a woman who has to step up and take the leadership role. Women in this position feel as if they have to defend themselves, and because there's not much there by way of container, that's really down to being able to control everything.
Hmm.
When this polarity in a relationship between a man and a woman is flipped, it causes a hell of a lot of pain for both the man and the woman in the situation, whether they are admitting to the problem or even aware of what the problem is or not. But let's just talk about women because today is about women, right?
And that's a good point. I mean, I see these kinds of issues play out all the time. And in my own life, when I was with a narcissistic woman, there is a little bit of a polarity switch in that regard too, because as the man, when I was putting her on the pedestal more and chasing her, that was more of a submissive position to be in. Now, is this how it is every time when a man's with a narcissistic woman? Not necessarily, but I think there was an element of that in the situation I was in.
What it does to a woman is causes her to spend her life in pain physically, mentally, and emotionally. For I've been talking a lot about the fact that a man who is not in his masculine traits is a man who can't create a container and who can't positively own a woman. Now, I gotta make this a little bit more clear because obviously we've got this super negative connotation with the idea of ownership, and most people don't understand what containment actually is. So, first, I'm gonna hit you out of the bat with something that most feminists are gonna hate. Ready for this? Women want to be owned, they just don't wanna be controlled. So many women, in fact, most women, would rather choose to be positively owned, even if that comes with a side dish of being controlled, than to be completely free but having to fend for themselves all the time.
Now, women might disagree with this when they hear it, but when you look at their actions, a lot of times it absolutely plays out. So they want to be owned and not, don't think of any of the negative connotations you think of with the word owned, but they don't want to be controlled. That's the difference. And what proves her point about this is look at how many women say they have an ex who's a narcissist. That should prove the point that they would rather be with a dude who's more toxic and controlling than a guy who is missing those masculine qualities and has neither. He has no ownership, no containment, and isn't controlling either because he's submissive, he's weak, he's passive, and women really can't stand that. So, and it's not that they like being controlled. That's not what it is at all. It's not that they like narcissistic guys. The narcissistic guys generally just have more of the qualities they like than those other weak passive guys do. So those are the reasons why the weak passive guys, they strike out in the dating world. You're more likely to see them in the MGTOW world or the red pill world. That's where you'll see those kinds of guys. And granted, there'll be narcissistic guys in the red pill world too.
Another way of saying this is that it's a very rare woman who would actually choose to be a stray. Let's talk about positive ownership, shall we? Because you've got so many negative projections on the idea of ownership. To positively own something is to take it as a part of yourself.
To positively own something is to take it as a part of yourself. And what she's about to say is so you can't hurt that thing without also hurting yourself. To me, that's a great definition. If you really love someone and you're going to protect them, think about how you would love your kids. Yeah, you're going to treat your kids like that, right? That is positively owning them.
Obviously, if something's a part of you, it belongs to you in some way, right? However, when something becomes a part of you, it is impossible to hurt that thing without hurting yourself. It's impossible for it not to be a priority to act in that thing's best interest. This means with true positive ownership, the best interests of that thing is your utmost concern. So let's apply this to men and women. When a masculine energy takes positive ownership of a female, the best interest of that female is the man's utmost concern. Guess
That's a very good point. So, any man in a relationship, I think this is a good way for him to see that relationship. Okay, how am I going to fend for her? How am I going to try to make sure that she feels loved and she feels safe? What does that look like? What actions does that look like? And keep in mind, different things may make different women feel loved and safe.
what? This makes a woman feel safe and secure. To understand more about this, you can watch my video titled Own People, How to Take Ownership of Your Relationships. Now let's talk about containment. And I have to say that based off of this particular video, I'm actually considering doing an entire episode only on containment. Containment is not a limitation. Containment is to create a safe space for something to exist or some process to occur within that safe place. When it comes to the containment that exists between a man and a woman, one of the best analogies you can think of is a clamshell and a pearl. The masculine serves as that clamshell that enables a woman to be soft, open, and receptive. Now imagine removing that protective shell. The woman would immediately contract, go rigid, and into a state of defense. It is a coping mechanism rather than a natural feel-good state of being. And very few women can live in this state, which is why they would choose an asshole who can provide ownership and containment over a nice guy who can't.
And this is the behaviors where it might look like the woman's being irritable and cranky, and some guys might label it as nagging, but that's not always the right way to label it, right? Because if a woman wants a man to do something, to take care of something, and then the guy isn't doing it, he isn't stepping up, the man might label that nagging, but it's really just him not taking ownership of the situation. He's not taking responsibility. He's not taking accountability. And the woman's calling him out for it. He doesn't like it, especially if he's a narcissistic guy. And so he's going to label that nagging, but that's not really an accurate definition. But the point is, when a woman doesn't feel safe and loved, she'll have some of these behaviors that Teal just talked about.
The ones who do it tend to turn angry, resentful, chronically stressed, and bitter. I have to mention here again that there's been these studies that are done in terms of what predicts good mothering behavior, and in fact, it's the presence of a good father. So, regardless of whether or not you would like to believe that females can exist on their own and don't need men, or vice versa, that's not actually the truth in this universe. It is that masculine energy that allows the feminine energy to bloom into this fashion that expresses in these ways that create so much health within society and on the planet. I also have to mention here that women who consciously choose for these polarity flipped relationships, they tend to have extreme amounts of trauma relative to being controlled, especially at some point in their life by a man.
Uh, that sounds like what I said earlier, right? And that's exactly what happens, right? They feel unsafe with a man who is really masculine because those guys have burned them in the past. They've been abusive, controlling, etc. So they feel more safe with the guys that are the opposite of that. Now, granted, they're not getting any containment in that situation. They're not able to relax into their feminine in that situation. But when they have that trauma there, that's where they're going to feel safer.
Now, what do we know? I did an episode all about this, the pendulum swing, and all about healing, where one of the most common things we do when we suffer a trauma over here is that we swing the pendulum all the way to the other unhealthy opposite extreme.
And that's a great point by Teal. That happens all the time. The pendulum swings to the complete opposite direction. Balance, though, is where it's at. And the only way to get the balance is to try to learn and grow and make mistakes as we go. No one's going to be perfect with this right away. So when we're learning boundaries or we're learning how to be assertive, yeah, some people might go too far at first. They might not know the balance with it. but they have to learn it. And as long as they're willing to self reflect, they will be able to learn it over time. It just takes time.
5. Let's look at some other reasons why women might go for assholes over nice guys. Ready? We get our subconscious definition of love from our childhood home. This means that if little girls had assholes for daddies, there is a likelihood that they will actually associate more love in an environment with an asshole than with a nice guy.
And isn't that just like the video I made about how narcissistic parents condition their children to love narcissists? Yeah, that's exactly how it is, right? So if the woman had an asshole father, she's going to think, well, guys that give off that asshole vibe, that is what I was conditioned to associate love with, that kind of energy. And this is one of the reasons why people that had a narcissistic parent often wind up with a narcissistic romantic partner. Is it the only reason why? No, there can be other ways to get to that end point too. And some people, they'll do a flip of this. Like maybe their dad will be an alcoholic jerk. So they want to get with somebody that's the exact opposite of that. But what they think is the exact opposite, they still have the same core, though. The outward behaviors might appear different. It might look different on the outside. But when you peel away the layers of the onion, they can still be exactly the same as that person. But you see this dynamic all of the time. When someone's had a narcissistic parent, that's the initial trauma bond that conditions people to, oh, I'm an my primary caregiver was toxic, was a narcissist. That was my first trauma bond. And some people, they just transfer that trauma bond to other future dating partners.
What's more than that, we all have this unresolved trauma, and we keep experiencing or even recreating mirrors of that original experience so as to try to create resolve around it. This means if a girl had an asshole for a daddy, and deep down she always wanted to reform him and feel loved by him and win him over, she will subconsciously find a man who behaves just like him. In other words, also an asshole, in the subconscious hope that if he is reformed, and if she's able to win him over, and if she does make him become loving, she's just healed her daddy wound.
And you see that all of the time too. Cece and I talked about this, but she said that people try to heal their attachment wounds by seeking the love from the person that reminds them of the parent that they wanted the most love from. So that's exactly what Teal was just talking about here. So a woman has an asshole for a dad, and then she's going to find somebody that's similar to that asshole dad. And if she can convince that man to love her the way that her daddy didn't, now that attachment wound would be healed. You see them try to do this, but as you know, it just doesn't work like that, right? That's not the way to do it. The way to truly do it is to recognize the pattern, recognize what your dad was like, recognize what maybe the unhealed version of you wants in relationships, and then learn how to give that to yourself. Heal your attachment wounds, practice radical self respect, live a life that you enjoy, that's fulfilling for you, that is balanced, has friends, goals, good relationships, etc. And then take it from there. And when you do that, you're also happy and single at the same time. When you're happy and single, you're way more likely to be in a positive relationship and a good relationship, if you ask me.
This attraction stuff is quite complicated, so if you want to understand more about this, watch 2 of my videos. The first titled, Why You Keep Attracting the Wrong Person in Relationships, and the second being Attraction, Why You're Attracted to the People You're Attracted to. 6. There is a dynamic in some women, especially women who have extremely low self esteem, where if they encounter a man who is aloof and who refuses to commit, it actually triggers her own feelings of not being good enough. And that causes an automatic reaction of a desperate need to actually prove that she's good enough. So this actually flips the dynamic. Again, it's a flip polarity because the woman becomes the one who's chasing, and she begins to chase his approval.
And you see that all the time too. That's why there's memes like when someone doesn't see your worth, it's not a challenge to try to prove it to them. That's the dynamic she was just talking about. And this is something, it happens, especially when people are younger, especially if they're more insecure. When someone doesn't like them or they show indifference or they're aloof, it makes them feel inadequate. They're like, oh no, what's wrong with me that this person doesn't like me? So they take it as a challenge to try to earn that person's love and affection. And who also makes people earn their love and affection? Narcissistic parents. What do you know? But this is something that happens, and it's something to pay attention to, and it's something to recognize if you notice you have that impulse to do this.
She tries to get him to want her and to commit to her. There is an element of challenge in winning over a guy. But actually, I don't agree with most people in the world of experts in relationship when they say that women are after the challenge. This isn't actually what's happening. What's happening is underneath this challenge is this absolute desperate need to feel good enough. They do it because they're desperate for the self-esteem and confidence that comes as a result of it being confirmed that they're not only good enough, but wanted and special. Suddenly, it feels like if the guy who's acting like you're not good enough doesn't decide he wants you, you really aren't good enough. To the contrary, if a man who's an asshole will morph into an affectionate good man, and even more than that, a good daddy for you and you alone, it makes a woman feel even better about herself. This dynamic only really appeals to women who have low self-esteem, women who are thrill seekers, which are very, very rare, or women who also have commitment issues. If you are a woman who desperately needs to feel special, especially if that desperate need to feel special arises from childhood wounding, you're at special risk for falling into this particular dynamic. Again, any of these adult life dynamics I'm talking about have their roots in childhood experience. 7, another reason why women could be going for assholes. There's a sad element to codependency. Now, a lot of women develop in their lives a strategy of codependency within relationships. Now, one of the elements of codependency is you've got such a deep level of shame that you don't actually feel like you're worthy of being with somebody who is good or who is functional.
And you see this a lot too, especially when women are younger. They've told me this a lot. They want a guy that is going to treat them the way they feel about themselves. And some women have the awareness to recognize this in themselves, but you see it. And then when a guy's being what they would think is too good or too nice, it actually makes them feel uncomfortable. And they think, what is this? And they try to run from that because it just feels too uncomfortable for them. And those are the guys, or excuse me, those are the women that feel more comfortable in the more dysfunctional dynamics. And again, this isn't every woman. Every woman's story is going to be a little bit different, just like every man's story is going to be a little bit different. It is just one version of a dynamic that plays out.
This means a lot of codependent people, in this case women, get into the fixer role in a relationship. When somebody is in the role of the fixer in the relationship, they can actually avoid their own shame. Not only can they avoid their own shame by focusing on the other person's dysfunction and not their own, they also have the guarantee that that other person, based on their dysfunction, will stay with them forever. Not only that, this serves as an antidote, not a very positive one, but an antidote nonetheless, for their shame. In that if you're in the relationship with a dysfunctional individual who needs to be fixed, guess who's always the good guy?
And that's a sneaky one there. Men do this too, by the way. And this is me. I was guilty of this as well, by the way. So when I was with a borderline woman, I thought I was just so much healthier at the time. Oh, I have my shit together. And she idealized me and acted like I did really have my shit together. But what happened was she had so many problems that I became addicted to trying to solve her problems. I became the fixer. But here's the thing. You can't help anybody that doesn't want to help themselves, period. But I was addicted to trying to solve these problems. And whatever I said, though, it just fell on deaf ears. And I came up with a solution. For every solution I came up with, she gave me 3 reasons why it wouldn't work. It reminded me of the saying that a pessimist is someone that complains of the noise when opportunity knocks. That was that dynamic. But the point of me saying this was, I wasn't as healthy as I thought I was, because if I was, I wouldn't have been in that dynamic to begin with. I wouldn't have become addicted to solving her problems. I wouldn't have tried to be the fixer. I would have said to myself, I can't solve her problems. She's got to solve her problems on her own. And this is a good thing to go up to, because this is where the nuance comes in. Where earlier she says containment, right? positive ownership. So where's the line? The line is recognizing what is something that you can't do for the other person. You can't do someone else's internal work. You can't help them become more emotionally mature. You can try to do other things. You can try to encourage them to grow, etc. But you can only lead the horse to water. You can't make it drink. So that's where you would draw the line. Okay, this is where positive masculine containment ends. And this is where she needs to do the work on her own. And of course, yours truly has blundered every one of these lessons. And when you blunder lessons and you learn them the hard way, they stick. And so that's one of the reasons I'm here talking to you right now about it.
Some women choose assholes so they can fix them or love them anyway, because it makes them the saint and therefore feel good about themselves by comparison. It also serves as an externalized way of fixing and loving the part of them that they think is completely unlovable.
Ah.
8. This is my last point. There could potentially be more, but I've hit the 8 major points. A lot of women believe that the assholes are actually more straightforward than the nice guys.
That's a great point for the quote unquote nice guys to hear. Teal also has a video, The Difference Between Nice and Kind. That's another good one as well. But that's what happens to the quote unquote nice guys. They're not direct and they're not straightforward. So it comes off as sneaky and manipulative. It comes off as covert manipulation. And I think a lot of those guys don't realize that's how it comes off. But women know. Like women know that, especially if they're attractive, they see how men treat them. They see how men give them attention. And they know the ones that are trying to like sneak in through the back door and try to covertly manipulate them into dating them or getting them into bed versus the men that, no, they don't make any reservations about it. They don't try to hide it. They're like, yeah, I'm into you. And if you're a woman, you're probably going to feel more comfortable with a guy that is a little more direct and straightforward than the guy who tries to pretend that he's not into you.
There's a lot of talk in the female world that nice guys only complain about the fact that girls don't like them and like assholes instead because they are upset that their nice guy behavior doesn't get them laid more. Meaning that nice guys might just be every bit as much of an asshole, but a manipulative, covert one. Women actually see niceness often as an act, a way of bribing her to give him what he wants. And to be completely honest with you, there are some incredibly dangerous sociopathic men who use this strategy of niceness to entice a woman into a relationship, and then he pulls a bait and switch. And the women who have experienced this level of trauma with this type of men, believe me, they've spread the word around that this kind of thing happens.
And these are the women that have been with what class? The narcissistic guys. The narcissistic guys, not even the quote unquote nice guys, but it could be more of a covert narcissist, let's say, that puts on the love bombing routine. They have that mask up. They're very nice. They're very attentive. They try to be attuned to their needs in the beginning. But then, as time goes on, the mask falls off. It switches into devaluing. The man's not receiving the same kind of supply that he did from the beginning of the relationship because it's getting kind of boring to him or old. So then he'll switch to devaluing to get negative supply. And H.G. Tudor always says negative supply more powerful than positive supply from the same person over time. And I can see how that's the case.
So there you have it. It turns out that female behavior is not actually irrational. There are legitimate reasons for it. So what does this mean? It means the key to a woman's heart and even into her panties is not to become a jerk. Have a good week.
All right. That's the end of that video there. And I think that's a very necessary lesson, though, for men and women both. And I don't really know where the pushback would come from that video. It seems pretty legit to me. So, but someone was saying before they get turned off by Teal Swan. So here's my thoughts on Teal Swan. I always tell people, you got to separate the message from the messenger. So Teal Swan, the messenger, you know, I have a couple reservations about that. I've seen how she's treated people in some of her documentaries. I know she thinks she's some sort of alien. And it's like, you know, that's a little wild. It's a little wild that she says those things. I mean, I don't completely dismiss it outright. And some people accuse her of lying about her backstory. I don't know. It would be if not a good character if she did lie about her backstory, but I don't know. I don't know. I know enough to say for sure. But in terms of her message, there's few things that I disagree with her about her message, especially in the male female dynamics. I agree with her the most in this area. There's other things I do disagree with her on. Like, for example, attraction. She has an interesting point about attraction where she says, you're only attracted to qualities that you lack. And it's like, is that really true? I don't know about that. If I ever invite her on the show, that's one I would talk to her about because I don't think I agree with that. Because she's saying you won't be attracted to someone unless they have something you lack. I think that's a little bit of a, what's the word for it? Incomplete explanation, we'll say. I think it's more to it than that. But yeah, I definitely prefer Teal Swan to Oprah. Oprah's just a powerful billionaire at this point. She's in the Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mackenzie Bezos club. And they probably hang out with Jay-Z and Rihanna and Beyonce and all that. I don't need that. But that being said, it was a pretty good event that she had there. It opened up the door to a lot of good discussions about the no contact thing. And that was good. It gave me some good content ideas. But back to Teal Swan. So besides those character issues, I haven't seen her be as harmful per se as some of the self-aware narcissists, for example, because a follower of the channel here said, Jared, what's the difference between Teal and the self-aware narcissist that you don't like? And that was a good question, a very fair question, actually. And my answer was, the self-aware narcissists, when they go down into the trying to manage the image of narcissism thing, I don't like that one bit. I think that can be very detrimental. It can lull the victims into a false sense of security, and they can kind of manipulate them. And I don't think that part's good. And they kind of try to police how people talk about narcissism. And when you try to police how people talk about narcissism too much, I think that comes at the expense of helping the victims. So that's my problem with the self-aware narcissists, with their message. Now, in terms of them, the messenger, I've had a problem with almost every single one of them, besides Kylie Rackham. I haven't had a problem yet with Lee Hammock, though Christian John has. But Kylie Rackham, I have not. Although I heard that she's not even a narcissist. She's just borderline, which might even make more sense. But all of the rest of them, there's been something. The other exception is H.G. Tudor. H.G. Tudor, he doesn't pretend not to be a narcissist. And so, in a weird way, I trust him more because I think he's just going to be straightforward. It is what it is. Exactly what Teal Swan just said about dating, right? There's no sneakiness there. I'm not trying to pretend to be a better person than I am. No, H.G. Tudor, he is who he is. And and there's a possibility H.G. Tudor is just playing a character anyway. That's also a possibility. I don't know. Like, I've never seen him. I've talked to him twice, but I've never seen him. But again, I trust HG. I trust HG. He shows up when he's supposed to show up. I don't expect him to backstab me or something. But these other self-aware narcissists that I will not name, you already know that's what they're willing to do. You already know they're going to be toxic as can be and try to run smear campaigns and get their flying monkeys to attack you. I don't need that. And so that's why I say the self-aware narcissists, you got to be careful with them. And other people were saying to me, well, these other people in the space, they talk to the self-aware narcissists. And I would say, well, I used to be one of them. I used to be one of them that tried to give them a platform. But I've learned. I've just learned. And I've decided to make a new decision about it. That's what I've done. So Ellie says, actually, she is more attention getting than Oprah for me. More attention getting? What do you mean by that? Like, as in more attractive or more attention seeking? Each creator has their own style and their own understanding in this field, combined with common knowledge about basic human psychology. Correct. Correct. Also, to note, Ellie, I could almost guarantee you there are some narcissistic people in the victim side of the space too. They don't claim to be self aware narcissists, they claim to be victims. But I also think there's a some that are narcissistic too. Now, how severe are they? I don't know. Maybe they were just out narked in their relationship. Maybe. Or maybe they weren't even out narked. They're just playing the victim. But that happens. I mean, being a victim in this space is something that a lot of narcissists would gravitate to because if they can make content about it, they can play the victim, appear to be the expert, they can get narcissistic supply, attention, admiration, acknowledgement, all things that are very attractive to narcissistic people. So that's my way of saying, even if someone claims to be a victim, you still have to do your due diligence on them. You can't just blindly believe it all. Oh yes, they must be right. They said they're this, so it's this. And I'm here to say, as someone that has had consultations with both sides of it, you don't always know until you hear the other side. You can make, and again, when I've had narcissistic people reach out to me, sometimes there's red flags in that first call, but not always. Not always. You're just hearing one side of the story. It's not until you hear someone else's side of the story, oh, now I see. Now it's a little bit different. She is more genuinely interested in this field and can package her content in a strong, clear way. Yeah, I mean, I think Teal is a force for good in the space. Now, I don't necessarily like how she runs her groups from what I saw. It seemed a little bit obnoxious to me what she did. But hey, if that's how she runs her groups and everyone's okay with it, okay. And you also have to think of this too. You don't know how they edit these things. They can edit these things to make it look much worse than it is. That's also possible. And the certain self-aware narcissist who will remain unnamed, that's what he did to me in Dr. Salerno. He pieced together some things to try to make us look worse. And so if someone didn't do their due diligence and look into the background, it was going to look pretty bad. So that's something to keep in mind there as well. But I think the world needs Teal's message in that stuff. I would have to look more at her other topics and what she says about them to know what I really think about the rest of them too. But a lot of the stuff with dating and attraction, I agree with. I haven't watched her as much recently, so I'll have to take a look at her again. I don't know if I agree with her about attraction. She has some interesting thoughts about kinks and fetishes that I think I agree with too. What she says about that. One video I didn't like of hers when she was talking about hot girl problems. Like she was almost going on a victim routine, talking about herself as a hot girl problem. Oh, when you're a hot girl, when you're a beautiful girl, other women hate you, and men only want one thing from you. So everyone's going to be fake. And it's like, you know what? Everyone does have problems. Yes, attractive people have problems too. But it's also, I would say, there's a lot of privilege that comes into being attractive too. There just is. In fact, you could argue that attractive privilege is one of the most powerful privileges because anyone can come into money, but not everyone can be attractive, even if they have money. Now, Kylie Jenner, she might be the exception to that because she looks like a completely different person, but she was able to transform herself because of having the money to do those plastic surgeries. But let's face it, that's not usually they don't work that good. With her, they actually did a good job on her and she looks pretty now. But the point is, attractive privilege is absolutely a thing. It does change how people look at you, it changes how people treat you. And in some ways, as a woman, yeah, that can be annoying, I'm sure. It can be annoying when every man you meet just wants to sleep with you or something. Yeah, I get it. I can put myself in their shoes and to think, wow, it must be something. But to really lean into the victimhood of that, yeah, I don't know. That wasn't my favorite. Oprah is way too performative and fake in this field lately. I mean, she's just about, it's almost like Dr. Romney in a way. She wants to swoop in and just be the expert. I'm Oprah. I'm the daytime television expert, but now I'm going to be the YouTube expert. And I was debating today what I should go over. Dr. Romney, who was just on Lewis Howes, and she was going over some stuff, genetics versus environment, are narcissists insecure, the same old things. And if you want me to, I can go over that whole thing because I have a fair amount of disagreement with her. But it can be the same old stuff sometimes, I'm trying to find different topics to talk about. And when I bring up Teal here, it's kind of interesting to me because it kind of connects what I've been talking about with other interesting things as well. Because learning about narcissism is one step. But if someone wants to date afterwards, now you're going to have to apply the lessons that you learned from the narcissism space, plus some of the things that Teal is talking about in some of these videos. So to me, it's interesting. But Dr. Romney, I can go over her videos, but it's just the same old things. Another thing I'm going to go over is Duncan Trussell and his mother did a podcast 5 years ago. And in a roundabout way, they do talk about the nature versus nurture debate and the environment. And I think it's pretty interesting because Duncan Trussell's mom, and maybe some of you don't know who he is, but he's a cool dude. And his mom was a psychologist. Duncan Trussell is a comedian. And his mom's got a good vibe. If you listen to her voice, there's just something very calming and soothing about it. And at some point, probably next week, we'll play that. And I think you'll all like that. But anyway, that's really all I had here for you all today. Shorter video. I'm a little more tired today. Because when it comes to going live, I don't always have the energy to be live for hours at a time. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I can be live for 2 to 3 hours and I'm all good. Other times, didn't get a good night's sleep. And I'm just not. And for me, since I'm on the spectrum, I have to be in a good place to be social. If I'm not in a good place or I'm tired, I don't really feel like being very social anymore. Ellie says, it is all about witnessing all the nuance and flavors of the narc phenomenon. This can be tedious, even frustrating. That is a way to learn. Yeah, I mean, we're going over it. I got in trouble when I disagreed with Dr. Romney on Instagram. Some people were like, "Oh, you're being mean. We need to all be on the same side." And I was just like, hey, I mean, we can disagree on one thing. If you can't disagree on one thing, I mean, what are we doing here? But they got mad at me because I had said, it was the part where she said, don't tell me your 17-year-old is a narcissist. Call back in 10 years. And I said, nah, that's probably not the best way to go. Because there can definitely be things they can work on at 17, especially if you think that. But people were telling me I was being way too hard on her. It's like, I disagreed with one thing. Like, I don't want to hear that. I agree, Ellie. We got to take care of ourselves. Part of practicing radical self-respect is taking care of us. Because when we take care of ourselves, we'll be best able to help others. But check out the Josh interview. And now what about the 17-year-old thing? But you should all check out the Josh interview. Check out the Dr. Carrie McAvoy interview. Dr. Salerno and Christian John. They're coming on the show in a couple weeks. You got it, Ellie. You know I'm always happy to help. But everybody, over and out, Ellie and Mac and everyone else who was here. No Cat and no George. No Jolly. I started late tonight. That was part of the problem. You got it, Mac. I'll be back again before you know it.